Hey there, hunters. Welcome back to the Gunners Guild. I guess I did have some ideas for Palworld videos that I wanted to share with you all, so we're going to start with those. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at the Palworld teams that consist of two pals that hover around you and attack while not being active, those being Daedream and Dazzi. The idea here was pretty obvious from the get-go. Like, as soon as I started playing Palworld, I wanted to make a team revolving around Daedreams, because, I mean, they're great. They just fire magic bullets constantly without being able to die as they're not actually active. I thought that'd be a great idea. And at the early levels, they performed pretty good, and I wondered how well they'd scale to like level 50 and trying to get them like min-maxed, because I was hoping it would be just like unstoppable. So that's what I've been working on the past few days. Sadly, the server I'm playing on is 1x rates, so leveling pals kind of takes forever. So it takes a bit of time to get the teams together, but I finally wanted to talk about the pals and whatnots because I finally got this stuff set up. So finally bred the Daedreams and the Dazzi to be as best as I could for kind of what I want them to be. So, I mean, I kind of min-maxed their IVs, but only really the attack stuff is what I cared about. Anyway, on the Daedream side, I went with Lord of Shadows, Legendary, Musclehead, and Ferocious for the passive skills on the Daedreams, which you can do by chain breeding down like the Necromus pal and his abilities, because he's got 2 of them. And then you just kind of move the pals over to any combination of pals that end up with Daedream. Now for breeding, I did find getting 3 out of 4 abilities on one pal with like no other 4th skill, and then your last skill that you want is like 1 out of 4 on your second pal with no other abilities, and then breeding those 2 had huge success rates for getting the 4 out of 4 skills that you want. I've tried breeding with like 3 out of 4 and 3 out of 4 with the 2 parents, didn't work out. 3 out of 4 and 1 out of 4 seems to be like where you want. Now obviously the magic bullets that Daedream shoots are dark damage, because they do get resisted by dark pals and deal more damage to normal pals. So because of that, we do have to get the Lord of Shadows perk. And so altogether, we have about 90% increased damage. Now with the Daedreams made and leveled up, I pumped the pal souls to increase only their attack, because they're not going to be active anyway, so like their HP and defense doesn't really matter. In the end, they're going to end up around, 1,000 to about 1,300 attack power, which will vary kind of significantly depending on your IVs, which are indeed a thing in Palworld. Now, I also decided to make my last slot a Hoot Crate, which has the passive ability to increase the attack power of Dark Pals, which means that all of their 4 Daedreams are going to get a slight damage boost. Now, Hoot Crate only really increases their damage by about 10 to 11%, so it's probably better to just run a 5th Daedream if you wanted, but I wanted to test this out. A bit of a side note regarding their passive abilities for Daedream and Hoot Crate. When you use the Pal Condenser to upgrade their passive skills, I know they get better, but I think it's only like very, very slightly. Like Hoot Crate's power boost with a default 0-star Hoot Crate bumps my Daedream's power from 1,117 to 1,189. That's 72 power, a little more than 6%. But the 4-star Hoot Crate grants it up to 1,261, which is about a 13% increase. Now, if you check this against a lower level pal, it's supposed to be 10% for 0-star Hoot Crate, which it does show there, and 20% for a 4-star Hoot Crate. And it adds up properly, like you go from 203 attack to 223 to 243. Great. But this means that it's only increasing the base stats of the Pokemon and not taking into account the additional damage stats from the passive skills. So really, we're only bumping up our damage by about half of what it's supposed to be doing. So like an 11% more damage for 4 Daedreams isn't worth it. You should just go with 5 Daedreams. I just didn't want to breed and meld the 5th Daedream because, it takes forever, but that is definitely the better option. Now also regarding Daedream's passive, obviously it increases the damage of the bullets slightly, but it doesn't actually increase their fire rate. So Daedream only shoots their magic bullets about once every 10 seconds or so, which is kind of disheartening. I was hoping they would do it more frequently, but I had them in max anyway, so just pump up their star ratings. And so where do these Daedreams actually end up? How effective were they? Is it worth breeding them and grinding them, leveling them? Well, personally, I'm not impressed. Now, that impression may change in the future, because right now I don't have like very many other teams that I've tried to like min-max, so I don't really have much to compare to, but I feel like this isn't really the way to go. I'm not going to claim like this is a lot of damage. Like, sure, the damage is okay. 700 to 1,000 damage per magic bullet on the last bosses seems pretty good. I only wanted to test these against level 50 bosses, because that's like the only way to get a good feel for the damage without levels making the difference. So like, they put in work, and it is passive damage because you can still use like your guns and one other active pal, so I'm not saying that they're trash, but honestly I was expecting them to be a bit more effective than they are. Like, I'm going to still use them, but they don't fire their bullets while you're riding a pal, which is kind of a letdown because you could just do some crazy shenanigans if that was the case. That'd be fun. And they don't really deal more than like 2 shotgun shells worth of damage to bosses, so it's not a ton of extra damage. But if you want, they will eventually solo the bosses if you just keep running around, so that's kind of a plus. And like, it just kind of sucks that you have to be really close to a boss and kind of keep attacking the boss in some way for them to keep attacking, because they just kind of stop after a while. It's really hard to get their AI to, just keep attacking. And again, I don't have any other teams to set up to completely compare them, but I feel like the effort to breed these and spend the PAL souls isn't really worth it. Thankfully, you can get the PAL souls back though. But it was a good test and a good way for me to learn how to breed and, do all this stuff. So I'm glad I did it. I wanted to try it since the beginning of Palworld, and now I figured out that, I don't really like it. But anyway, we're going to move on to Dazzi next, who does exactly the same thing, but rather than shoot dark orbs, they instead call down lightning bolts. Now, unfortunately, these kind of end up being in the exact same situation as Daedreams in that they hit for about 700 to 1000, but their bigger issue here is that the lightning bolts take a second to drop, and it's really easy for bosses just to walk away from the lightning bolts and just avoid them altogether. Flying bosses also don't really seem to get hit by them if they're too high off the ground, because the actual hit occurs on the ground. The lightning bolt coming down doesn't actually make contact, so it's really hard to actually have these land consistently. So without going over too much about the same thing with the Dazzis, I bred them out in pretty much the same way, using Ozark for Lord of Lightning, and then getting Legendary from Jet Dragon, moving it down, and so this kind of took a while to do. And so these Dazzis ended up with Lord of Lightning, Legendary, Ferocious, and Musclehead. And again, I PAL sold them up just for their attacks. I didn't really care about their HP and defense and stuff. And again, they do perform fine. It's nothing crazy, it works, it's just not as effective as I was hoping for, unfortunately. Now, you can still let them solo some bosses eventually, and it is kind of a cool gimmick to have like your 4 or 5 pals running behind you just bolting stuff down. I just don't think this is an optimal strategy for how much breeding was involved, and ultimately your guns and probably just going to deal more damage than these pals ever will. So all in all, don't really recommend it, but here's the results in case you're wondering. They're kind of slow, but yeah, I got it done. I can check that one off. So thank you all for watching. Good luck out there, hunters. I got a couple other builds and teams I want to set up and try, so stay tuned for those. Anyway, peace and good luck.